He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
Welcome to The Alex Marlow Show. I am Alex Marlow. Thank you for being here and for subscribing, leaving comments, emailing me at aloha@alexmarlow.com. Most importantly these days, picking up a copy of Breaking the Law. I perform it. If you prefer an audiobook, that's all good as far as I'm concerned. Getting absolute rave reviews. I got a very generous review from my friend, new friend, Hugh Hewitt, who I did not know very well, and we just recently connected. I'll be filling in for him coming up here in a couple weeks. I'll let you know when that happens. But he was kind enough, unsolicited, to tweet out, finished Alex Marlow's excellent Breaking the Law, and it is a pretty remarkable work for a writer, reporter who is not a lawyer. That's why it's very accessible for everyone. For the journos out there who actually want to understand what the center-right saw and felt about the Lawfare directed at President Trump for the 4 years between his terms, read this book. I would say that is the number one thing about the book. That is, he's got it. I think there's many other, essential components, but I think he nailed the right one. It's really kind of him. It's really, I did not ask for it. It is nothing in it for him. Just a nice, classy thing to do for one of my colleagues at Salem. So thank you, Hugh. I appreciate it. This show today is a banger. I'm repurposing my 3 hours of national talk show hosting responsibilities for my friend Larry Elder from last night, and it was a hot show. We start by breaking down the security guarantees that Trump, I guess, had promised Zelensky, but we really get into what that all actually means on the show with some clips from Trump's interview with Fox and Friends, which I play some of that, break that down. And then we get into Elvis. Joy Reid is on a jihad against Elvis. I explain why she's nuts, and we have fun making fun of her with her Trumpian haircut. We got that going. I do a big takedown of the New York Times. We wrote a hit piece of my friend Ed Martin, simply because Ed Martin wants to enforce the laws and hold the bad guys accountable, those who had tried to do harm to you and your president and the people you support. They've weaponized the Justice Department against us, and now Ed Martin is trying to hold them to account, and thus he's persona non grata, New York Times. So we get into that and so much more as well. Got some callers going. It was a hot show, and I think you're really going to like it. But before we get into it, I want to talk about some of the people who make the show possible, and I'll start with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. I'm excited to share with you something that is especially close to my heart, and that's the people of Israel. The Bible teaches us that in a world full of broken promises, one covenant remains unshakable. That's God's eternal promise. His wavering commitment to Israel, his beloved people. And now more than ever, God is calling Christians everywhere to support Israel, to be a living testimony that his promises endure forever. I've chosen to partner with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews as one way to align myself with God's eternal plan. For over 40 years, this wonderful ministry has faithfully provided nutritious food, care, and life-saving aid to Israel's most vulnerable, the poor and the elderly, some of which were Holocaust survivors. And when crisis strikes, like rocket attacks or urgent humanitarian needs, IFCJ is already on the ground, responding with compassion and support. Join me in standing for Israel and declaring God's faithfulness to all generations. To learn more, easy to do, ifcj.org. That's ifcj.org. Good people, great cause. Help make the show possible as well, as do my friends at the American Beverage Association. Think for a minute about the drinks you grew up with that you still love today, the ones you got to have at the barbecue or in the break room. I'm talking Coke, Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, Diet Coke, Diet Mountain Dew, those fancy new Diet Coke Cherry Revival cans they got going. Those things are charming. This is an iconic brand. These iconic brands are part of the American story, and they have been for over 100 years. That's a century. With everyone talking about American jobs lately, the companies behind these beverages have been walking the walk the whole time. America's beverage companies are making American products with American workers in America's hometowns. They employ over 275,000 men and women in all 50 states. These are people who show up every day, do the work, and deliver for our economy and our communities. You can see for yourself everything they're doing at wedeliverforamerica.org. That's wedeliverforamerica.org. Let's get into it. Me hosting The Larry Elder Show.
The Larry Elder Show starts right now on Salem News Channel.
I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and host of the Alex Marlow Show, and I'm in again for my friend, the sage from South Central, Larry Elder, my first boss in conservative media, and it is another hot news day. We'll start with what are the security guarantees? We talked about this a lot on yesterday's show. They came up this morning with President Trump speaking about them. Who's going to make them, and will they bring peace to Ukraine and Russia? Then we're going to talk about a major hit piece New York Times has on Ed Martin, one of the most productive people in the Trump administration, trying to hold the bad guys accountable. Then we're going to get into the nuances of redistricting, why I think Republicans are going to win a redistricting bloodbath before we finally get to some Maha. Talk about some seed oils, Bill Gates and synthetic butter, so much crazy stuff happening on the health front. And we're going to help you get a little bit healthier today on the Larry Elder Show. Check it out. I want you all to understand what that song means when you hear that music from Junior Walker and the All-Stars. If you're an LA conservative and you're driving around traffic and it's 3 o'clock, you get in the car, maybe getting picked up from school, that you know finally you're home, at least for a little bit, with Larry Elder. I've been listening to Larry for, 25, 30 years. My name is Alex Marlow, by the way, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, in for the Sage today, who was the man that got me on the path that I've been on, and I've been on a pretty nice run, I'm pleased to say, and the Sage was my guy. He was my first guy on the right where I thought, this guy knows what he's talking about. A Los Angelino growing up in LA, sitting in way too much traffic, listening to way too much talk radio and getting hooked. And the Sage was the guy that made me do it. And I became his intern. I used that resume item to go to work for Andrew Breitbart as the first employee for Breitbart News. And the rest is history. We were involved in, I think, being the pioneers of conservative new media. I would say without us, I don't think Donald Trump would have been elected once or twice, for that matter. And I've had a blast the entire time writing books. My latest one, you guys can see it on the set, Breaking the Law, out now on the New York Times bestseller list right now. So thanks to all of you for checking it out, and I'll have some commentary on that later in the show. But a big thank you to Larry Elder and the team at Salem for having me in today, because this is one of those things that everyone says it's a thrill to be on the show. No, this is a thrill to be hosting for Larry Elder, and it is something that I cherish. I really do. So hopefully you stay with me. We got a phone number here, 888-871-SAGE. I don't normally give it out before I throw out the topics, but I will encourage you to call in. We got time for calls today. We had some great calls yesterday. I had a blast with some of the callers. I miss it. I'm podcasting, the Alex Marlow Show podcast on the Salem News Channel. You can get that Monday through Friday, daily news show for you. It's a dang good show, if I say so myself. Doing very well. Hit the top 100 on Apple News last week, which is very nice. So that's a lot of shows, a lot of competition. Everyone's got a podcast. I sometimes feel like some days there are more people recording podcasts and listening to them. But you know what? I'm just gonna keep making them. I'm gonna keep podcasting. Keeps going well. And then I'm on the Salem News Channel on the weekend, so you could check out my show there, those of you who are watching on the stream. So Breitbart.com is the place for all your news. That's all I got to say. Let's start with the big story today. We talked a lot yesterday about what is the definition of security guarantees, because we're trying to figure out how Donald Trump could forge a peace between Russia and Ukraine. This was a war that was started by Joe Biden and Joe Biden's administration. Vladimir Putin, he said so on Friday, and this affirms everything that I had written about, reported on. I wrote extensively about this in my second book, Breaking Biden, where I broke down exactly why Putin invaded Ukraine, and he was baited into it by Joe Biden, just flat out, full stop. And if you don't agree with that, it's because you're not spending enough time delving into it. I'm sorry. It's just the facts. Putin is not a trustworthy guy. I'm not a Putin fan. You don't trust what Putin has to say overall. But it's just the math is there. Trump put one Russophobe after the next. I'm sorry, Biden put one Russophobe after the next in charge of Russia-Ukraine policy. And he kept teasing, Tony Blinken was the worst of the group, that one day Ukraine could be in NATO. And that meant that in the former Soviet Union, there would be a NATO partner who, if you attack them at all, then that means that you would be obliged to fight a nuclear war on behalf of Ukraine. That's the implication of NATO. It was such a silly premise, and yet Joe Biden repeatedly let that go on, even though the precedent as put forward in past Russian invasions of Ukraine in that area is that whenever you tease NATO to new members of that Eastern Bloc, Putin always invades somewhere. This was what happened under Obama, and it happened under Bush. It didn't happen under Trump because Trump was smart enough to deal with that. And Trump is the smartest guy in the room right now, and he's got a real chance to forge a lasting and meaningful peace. But after Biden baited Putin into starting that war, which he did, the war's been devastating. Both sides continue to wage massive bombing attacks to this day. Trump, who's been very tough on Russia, is now in a wonderful position to do huge amounts of good. I will say this about President Trump. Always gets a bum rap about being some sort of a Russia stooge or some sort of a pro-Russia guy. Putin's really his friend. This is not true. This is a falsehood concocted by the Hillary Clinton machine. And a lot of it has to do with my friend and colleague, Peter Schweitzer, who was on the broadcast yesterday. You can check that out on Larry's podcast feed, also on my podcast feed, The Alex Marlow Show. We've got that interview for you if you want to check that out. But I spoke to Peter, who #1 investigative researcher in conservative movement, a colleague of mine at Breitbart News, and was our original national security editor when we had a website called Big Peace. I know some of you in the audience will remember that. But what Peter was laying out about the Clintons was that they were the ones who were vulnerable to Russian manipulation. They were the ones who were signing off on selling 20% of America's uranium reserves, precious metal if there ever was one, or precious element if there ever was one, to Russian-connected companies in the Russian government. At the same time, Russian oligarchs were loading up the Clinton Foundation with 9 figures in donations. At the same time, Bill Clinton was going over to Moscow and giving a speech 45 minutes for $500,000. Now, in inflation, how much is that now? I mean, it's got to be $1 million for a 45-minute speech. That's a good rate. Sean, what's your rate for a speech? Is it $1 million or 45 minutes? I'll tell you, you can get me and Sean at that rate now. You get both of us. So Bill Clinton's going over there bagging that sort of cash. And so they see the vulnerability, and this is straight out of Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky says you take your biggest vulnerability and you make that, you just pin it on the other guy. They keep doing it, and they'll keep doing it. We see it today with Gavin Newsom. I got some examples of this. Gavin Newsom now telling Trump he's weak on the border, he's weak on immigration. Why is he doing this? Because that's Trump's best thing is immigration. So it's not that sophisticated, but it is part of their playbook. It's part of what they do. So Clinton does that with Russia. And so in the meantime, Trump's Russia policy, quite tough. He took out some Wagner troops, which is essentially Russian special forces in Syria. Trump makes it difficult for Putin to operate Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would have funneled a bunch of money into Europe. And Putin also put sanctions on Russia, and he proactively sold weapons to Ukraine before the invasion in the Biden years. Trump did all this. So he proactively was supplying Ukraine with weapons. So Trump was actually much tougher on Russia in policy. He was just nicer in person because he's a negotiator and he knows you don't really get anywhere by being mean to most people. Maybe Jerome Powell at the Fed. He's trying that. He's going to try to bully Powell into lowering rates. But for the most part, when you start negotiating, it's incumbent upon you to treat the other side with respect, dignity. If you want a good outcome, it's usually the best move. And that's exactly what Trump did. So Trump, we learn trying to broker a peace. He cares deeply about a peace. And my question for him yesterday, and this is the one I was getting asked about, I've gotten multiple media inquiries about my take on this as someone who has a big audience of core Trump-supporting MAGA base voters. Could we ever have anything lasting where there's an American presence in Ukraine? And the answer is pretty much no. But we're smart. So if you do the math, that there's not going to be a brokered peace unless Ukraine feels like Russia is not going to imminently invade again. So that's not a peace. That's war. So how are we going to get there? Well, first of all, Putin's got to get some territory so he can post a W, because he's not going to go back to Moscow, to the Kremlin, and say, we lost. So you got to give him enough there. But then Ukraine is, well, let's assure he doesn't invade. The only way to do that is with security guarantees. I'm doing the bunny ears with my fingers, those of you who are listening. So what is that? So it can't be American security guarantees, but what does it mean if it's not American? It means that these NATO countries, Germany, UK, France, and they're willing to put troops on the ground. They're willing to put boots on the ground, so to speak. So they're the ones where if Russia were to invade, they're locked in a NATO-style alliance where they will have Ukraine's back. This is not a great scenario, because I would like the idea of Putin not to disrupt the West in that way, but they'll carry that burden, not us. So, but that's only going to go so far, because if Putin's really serious and he really moves quickly, efficiently, effectively, which he hasn't done in years, but you never know if he could regroup, then what is the UK and Macron and Merz and Keir Starmer going to do? They're going to go to Daddy. They're going to run to Daddy Trump, and they're going to say, Daddy, will you please help us? Will you bail us out here? And we don't want American ground forces defending Ukraine. I hope Ukraine stays Ukraine and Russia doesn't get new territory on a personal level, but not to the point where I'm willing to risk one of my son's lives to go fight in Ukraine. No, thank you. Not for me. That's someone else's war, literally speaking. And not to mention, we don't want to see a lot of escalation when it comes to nuclear-powered Russia. Why would you want that? You've got a force that I think Russia has more nukes than we do. You guys can use Grok and fact check me on that. I think they actually have a bigger nuclear arsenal than we do. That's how much of a threat Russia can be should they choose to go to that level, which they likely won't, because Putin is generally speaking rational, as odd as he is. And he doesn't want that either, I don't think, but he does want more of that Soviet territory. He does want more of that ability to see that the Soviet Union is not waning, it is on the rise. He wants that. He wants those optics. Both in terms of economics, in terms of perception around the world, in terms of his ability to broker deals around the world. That's what he wants. And so he's not going to take kindly to people trying to do a windmill dunk in his face. So you've got to understand that's the strongman ethos, and he's going to maintain that. And if that means an invasion, and if that means boots on the ground, they cannot be American boots on the ground. And I'll tell you, whoever will be the guarantors of security, and we'll do more of this after the break, I don't know if they're aware that the American MAGA base, Trump's base, is not interested. We are not interested in boots on the ground for Ukraine. Trump's got to navigate this. I think he can do it. I think he will do it. But this is not an easy task. We'll break it down some more today on the Larry Elder Show. I'm Alex Marlow, in for the Sage. We'll be right back. Do you guys ever spin any main ingredient on the bumpers? The main ingredient, Sean? It's I want to get the main ingredient going today. That's Cuba Gooding Sr. People don't know this. I mean, just one banger after the next. It just seems like something that'd be Larry's vibe. Larry knows so much about Motown. I could do a big Motown. I think I need to do a Motown special with Larry. I would like to interview Larry on Motown. I tell you, that would be a nice premium thing for Salem. If Phil Boyce is listening, I think that's the plan here. We got to do this. All right, let's get serious here. We are talking about security guarantees for Ukraine, ending the war in Russia, Joe Biden's war that he forced upon us. And the number here, 888-971-SAGE, if you'd like to be part of the show, 888-971-SAGE. I will take your calls on this topic. The president felt compelled to call in to Fox and Friends this morning. He's speaking to my friend Charles Hurt, as well as Lawrence Jones and someone else. Ainsley was there. Okay, let's play let's play some of this. This is the relevant part that Sean has isolated for me.
The thing that is surprising a lot of people is when it comes to the security guarantees. I know President Putin said no NATO, and you said, you know what, we're just going to take that off the table. But you did get President Putin to agree to NATO-like protections. So tell us about that. What does that entail?
Yeah, pause. First of all, that's a good question. It's very well framed, because this is my concern, which is that we know we're not doing NATO. But if we don't do NATO, what is the alternative? Because if it behaves like NATO, if it looks like a NATO and it quacks like a NATO, then it might be a NATO. And that's the problem here that I'm seeing, where there could be some problems with a lesser president. Not necessarily under Trump. I trust Trump on this stuff. And you don't have to. I'm not telling you to trust Trump on this stuff. I'm telling you on a personal, my opinion, Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart, and your humble host for today. I do trust Trump on this stuff. His foreign policy has been A+, but he will not be president forever. If we're lucky, he'll be president through 2036, and that's it. Then eventually he's going to have to retire and do something else. Okay, let's see the answer.
That entail?
Well, the war really started over NATO and Crimea, and they wanted Crimea back. That was given, not a shot fired by President Obama in perhaps the worst real estate deal I've ever seen. There's been a couple of them. I would say the Gaza Strip was a pretty bad one, too, given by Israel so they'd have peace. So they gave away a big percentage of their oceanfront property in order to have peace. How did that work out? Not so good. And Crimea is the apple of Ukraine. I mean, it's so beautiful. And Obama gave it away. Nobody ever mentions that. If I ever did that, the fake news would be writing about me day and night for years. He gave it away. He demanded that they let it go, and Russia came in and took it. Just took it like from a candy from a baby.
Sean, let me chime in on this point, because I want to make this point. This is not a primary point, but this is still an interesting point. The fact that Trump thinks of everything as a real estate deal, I think is helpful to us. I think that's why he wants to clean up D.C., is that he sees the real estate in D.C. as unbelievable. Those of you who have not spent a lot of time in our nation's capital, I lived there for 8 years. It is a incredibly beautiful city at its best. And it's getting overrun by left-wing radicals and fools who are destroying it. But the architecture is the best. The weather's incredible. It is just one of these places where it could be iconic. It could be the leader of the world. It kind of is already. And so why shouldn't it be excellent? And I think Trump does drive around and what's going on here? Like, why aren't people valuing their real estate? Because that's what the government does. When the government's fat and happy, they don't value their real estate and stuff like that. And that's why I'm hopeful he'll see stuff like L.A. If you drive around L.A., I live just north of L.A., for those of you who are unfamiliar. When you drive around L.A., you go to downtown's not usable, but then randomly there'll be a Michelin star restaurant that you'll be compelled to go to and spend too much money on every once in a while. But you can't just walk around downtown L.A. It's not a thing. You don't do that. People leave there. They try not to work there. They try to get out of there as fast as they can. And that's a disgrace, but we just accept it here because it's a one-party town. All right, continue, Sean.
Just took it like from a candy from a baby. And it was really Obama's, not really, I mean, that was pure and simple, Obama's fault. What a terrible thing he did to that country. And so they lost their heart. They lost the heart and soul of the Ukraine 14 years ago, whatever it might be. And it was so unnecessary to do that. And that's when it really began, when Obama gave it away. And then you had a lot of other events, but you have, tremendous hostility. The people of Ukraine were mortified when that took place. That really began a lot of hatred when they gave it. And they didn't have to. Not a shot was fired. They just took over the most valuable piece and the biggest piece in the sense of, and surrounded on four sides by ocean, just a little passage to get you back onto the mainland. The most beautiful piece of property you've ever seen as a real estate developer. I look at it, I said, why the heck did he do that to them? And so there's great hostility, and maybe rightfully so. But one thing was NATO. They went in. They said, we want you. We want to get Crimea back. This was at the beginning. Now Putin, in all fairness to him, he made a good deal. He got it from Obama. But they said, we want it back, and that was not exactly well received because it was like 12 years before. That's where Russia has its submarine base, and, that's been there long before Putin. They've been there for a long time, but long before Putin. And the other thing they said is, we want to be a member of NATO. Well, both of those things are impossible because, again, long before Putin, it was a no-no by Russia or the Soviet Union or anything you want to call it. Sort of a similar thing as it gets larger, but very similar.
Sean, so it is important here to emphasize how big of a deal that is, that the U.S. president is saying flat out no to NATO. There is no one with the spine in the Republican establishment or the Democrat Party who could say that to Ukraine. And they know that it is a disaster for the world if Ukraine joins NATO, but they won't say it like that. They won't just say it's impossible. And it's really good. And it's also interesting how it must be very funny to sit on the couch, Fox and Friends, because I can hear my friend Charlie. He would love to get in there. He'd love to jump in there with the president and kind of get him back on the rails here. But he was talking about real estate deals for a long time. There's nothing you could do. You got to let him roll. It's part of being the leader of the free world. We'll let him roll here, too, in the Elder Show. Let's do some more, Sean. Go ahead.
Similar thing as it gets larger, but very similar. But it was always a no-no. You could not. Russia said, we don't want the so-called opponent or the enemy, let's use that term, we don't want them on our border. And they were right. They were okay. And yet they went in and they asked, with the United States, they said, put us into NATO. And everybody knew you just can't do that. They would never have agreed to it. This is before Putin. This is long before Putin. It was just a no-no. It was something that was never going to happen. So they asked for it, and they shouldn't have asked for it because it was, very insulting thing. Now, they could have asked for many other things. But the other thing they wanted to do is getting Crimea back, and, that was given. They had built, they were expanding everything and spending a lot of money, all because Barack Hussein Obama gave it away in one of the dumbest real estate deals I've ever seen.
It's an amazing history that Trump lays out there. And he's got a surprising reason why he wants to get this deal done. I think this is beyond just legacy and beyond he wants a peace prize, which he does. I think it's beyond doing the right thing. He's got a very surprising thing, and I've got some personal insight into why he's giving this answer. I will give that to you right after the break here on the Leary Elder Show. My name's Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast, and I'll be right back.
You're listening to the...
That's the main ingredient. Now we're talking, Sean. Now we're in the zone here, the Elder Show. Alex Marlow here. Happy to be here with you all 3 hours today. I teased before the break that President Trump had a really interesting and important reason for why he wants to make sure there is peace between Ukraine and Russia. And I think this is honest, and it cuts to the heart of where his mind's at as he enters his 9th decade on the planet. Let's play cut 14 here, Sean.
Just want to end it. I want to end it. You know, we're not losing American lives. We're not losing American soldiers. We're losing Russian and Ukrainian, mostly soldiers. Some people, as missiles hit wrong spots or get lobbed into cities like Kiev and towns. But, you know, if I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's a pretty... I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons. Well, I think I saved a lot of lives with India, Pakistan. They were going at it. The planes were being shot down. That was going to be maybe a nuclear war if I let that go. And I did that through trade.
Isn't that something? If we were all preoccupied with how are we going to get to heaven every day, there would be a lot less war. And it's funny because I feel like one of those ideas you would seem like when I was growing up, maybe you'd hear that from, you know, second grade teachers and stuff, just sort of touchy-feely types. And now you hear it from the President of the United States, the alpha on the planet right now, the main character of the 21st century. And he's saying that one reason why I want this piece, because I think it's going to get me closer to heaven. I think that is so cool. And it's so great to hear that. And I just wish people could hear that who don't think that Trump is, who don't trust him, to hear that if that's where his mindset is right now, that should be very reassuring to the haters and losers, so to speak. And I told you I would say something personal about this. I spoke to Trump right after he was shot in the ear at Butler, Pennsylvania. And it was an interesting interview because he was still stressed out, I think, by the assassination attempt. He was behind this huge piece of plexiglass or whatever it is, a bulletproof glass that they've got. It was in Mar-a-Lago in a office, not in the main building, but a side building. And he was not in his best mood. I've spent a fair bit of time with the president over the years, but he was very, very clear-eyed on one specific topic, and that was talking about what he regarded as the divine intervention that kept him alive that day in Butler, Pennsylvania. And he walked through it, and he's done versions of this during his speeches, but where he was explaining how he had the sign, the illegal immigration sign he was looking at the time, how it was positioned on the opposite side of where it's usually positioned, causing him to turn his head at a specific moment in a specific direction. How normally he went to the illegal immigration talking points later in the speech. He came to it earlier that day. And talking about how the math on how if you look at the geometry of the human skull, that it needed to, if he had turned a little bit more, it would have caught a certain part of his head, or if he hadn't turned enough, the bullet would have caught another fatter part of his head. And then he talked about how if the bullet hadn't clipped his ear, if he hadn't got that little piece of his ear blown off his body, and he was still in pain for it when I was talking to him a couple of weeks afterwards, then perhaps he wouldn't have known anyone was shooting at him, and they would have gotten another clean shot, and that would have taken him out. And then, of course, he does something that he does very well. He has this dark sense of humor sometimes, and he did volunteer with a smile on his face. Could you imagine the propaganda? They explode my head on TV. It would have exploded like a watermelon. Can you believe what our enemies would have done with that footage? And he was kind of laughing at it, but also it's the darkest thing you've ever heard in your life. And so, of course, I asked the obvious follow-up, which is that, do you think it was God? Do you think God intervened? And he said, I don't see how it could have been anything else. He said, just flat out, like there's nothing else. And I'm with him on this. And I do think that has informed a lot of this first half of the first year of his presidency. And while people are actively rooting against him, and you can see it in the media who rushed to declare that Vladimir Putin was the winner of the summit on Friday with no evidence at all, actively saying that it was Putin who got the upper hand. Based on what? Based on nothing. This was the art of the deal. Of course it was. We don't know where it's going. This is a really hard test the president's trying to pass. But you can't be rooting against him right now because he sees this thing for what it is. He sees clearly the parties, what their interests are. He's an excellent negotiator. He's an expert negotiator, maybe the world's best. He's excited to do it. He's up for this. And he does feel like his mission is a godly one. And if you would have said that to Donald Trump, the billionaire playboy 25 years ago, that this is where he was going to be, I don't even think he would have believed you, but he's here now, and we're very fortunate to have that. And I think it's a very profound thing, and it's something that I wish all the haters and losers would hear that specific point, that part of the reason why I'm going to end this war that Obama and Biden got us into is because this is what God's vision is for me to get to heaven. So cool. Love it. You love to see it. I'm Alex Marlow, by the way, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News. This is the Larry Elder Show, and we'll be right back right after this.
When they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said,
you know, Tuesday is almost Friday. That's just a fact. It just is. It's almost Friday. People know this. I got a little thing I tell myself on each day to keep the vibe going, and Tuesday to me has always been almost Friday. That's how I think of it. And then, of course, you get to the pre-can. That's late on Thursday. You know, I got something for every day. Monday, though, is for utter seriousness, which is why I didn't bring this up yesterday. That's the motto on Monday. Monday is for utter seriousness. I got this from an aside from Dennis Prager himself. I'm in the half Dennis Prager studio right now, and we wish our friend so well. We love Dennis so much. I do, personally. All right, we got one more clip that Sean has pulled from me and Zach and the team from the Fox and Friends interview today from the president. He is the president, so we should hear him out in full. Let's play cut 15, please.
I know yesterday you talked about arranging a meeting to take place in 2 weeks between Putin and Zelensky. Is there an update there, and do you plan to attend?
No, I thought I'd do first let them meet. You know, they haven't been exactly best friends. They haven't gotten along very well. And I called President Putin yesterday, and I do have a good relationship, but it's, you know, only matters if we get things done. Otherwise, I don't care about the relationship. I do have a good relationship with him, but I want to get things done. You know, I've solved 7 wars. We ended 7 wars. I thought this would be one of the easier ones, and this has turned out to be the toughest one. India, Pakistan, I mean, these were big ones, and also all
Pause
big ones. And
for a second, Sean. First of all, this is such an interesting point that he makes here, because I think he thought he was going to crack this one open immediately, and he hasn't. And I think it's also interesting how he is the Salem guys here for the TV show. They're playing these incredible clips and images as B-roll, as they call it in the biz here. From the event yesterday. It's just, I can't help but think about if Barack Obama had assembled a group of people like this, the leaders of Europe together, they're all joking, they're having a great time, and he's holding court. I mean, just the semi-erotic tones that would be coming through at the New York Times opinion page every second of the day, and on MSNBC, it would have been truly X-rated, what we would have witnessed. And Trump did this. And again, we're just too casual about stuff that happens to Trump. And I'll get into this next hour. I'll talk a little bit about Breaking the Law, my book, about how we're way too casual about the oppression, the political persecution that Trump faced. We're also too casual that he pulled this group together. They seem to have a great productive day. And he just does, it's just second nature to him. And then the media is rooting against him to do this because with the left, political power matters more than America succeeding. That's just a fact. Continue, Sean.
So all big ones, and some going for 31, 32 years, one for 35 years. The Congo, think of that, the Congo and Rwanda for 35 years. I got that one done. I got them all done, but this one is the one that is the most difficult, and I thought it would be an easy one. So I hope President Putin is going to be good, and if he's not, it's going to be a rough situation. And I hope that President Zelensky will do what he has to do. He has to show some flexibility also. The thing is a mess. This was started by Joe Biden. This was a war that should have never happened. Millions of people are dead. The country's blown to pieces, Ukraine, and it's a shame.
If you think I'm joking that the left isn't rooting against Trump, how could you picture people like this rooting for him? Here's everyone's favorite Democrat spokeswoman Jasmine Crockett, who is a regular feature on the Alex Marlow Show and pretty much every conservative podcast, right, at this point. Play cut 4 for me, guys.
Most black people are not Republicans simply because we just is like, y'all racist. I can't hang out with the KKK in them. That's really what it is. But when we think about who we are as black people and we think about where we come from, most black people have very conservative values, right? But the reality is that, like, we just can't side with, like, the neo-Nazis in them.
You guys know that she went to private school. She's a privileged person. She doesn't need to talk like that. That's an affectation for her to talk hood. And she does that because she thinks it's pandering. It was really interesting. I was watching a clip of Megyn Kelly talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about how she's abusive to her staff. There was a video, I played this on the Marlow Show a couple of months ago, of Crockett doing a tour of her office. and how she basically, the congressional offices are not very big, and she converted an entire room into basically a makeup room so that she could get ready for her TV appearances. So a very odd person, but I don't know if it's news to her, but the KKK were Democrats. So it's just an important point that saying that we're the Republican KKK. Well, that was you guys. That's on you guys. But I will say there was something factual that she said that I think a lot of black people are Democrat because they just simply believe Republicans are racist. And I think we're doing a lot to undo that, but the left is kicking and screaming trying to make sure they stop us from that. Think about the most rapped about politician in the world by a mile is the president of the United States, and he's a white Republican. And still, we are in this environment where there are a lot of people who just simply regard Republicans as racist. And the way Larry's phrased it to me in the past is a Democrat good, Republican bad. And that really is the default setting for a lot of people, which is why some of the efforts President Trump is taking on to try to make it that we have some sort of level of basic civic engagement that's required for you to be able to vote. You know, you being able to show up on election day, you being able to have an ID. That's very important because the ultra low information people, they're not voting for Trump. They're voting against the party that has been called racist in the media. That's what they're doing. So it's one of the reasons why it's very important that we try to at least raise the bar a touch to contribute to America's electorate. All right. Ayanna Pressley, number 3, another one of the Democrat superstars. Let's play cut 3.
What this wannabe dictator wants is a citizenry that is ignorant and uninformed. He wants a citizenry that is indifferent to the suffering of its neighbors.
It's just such hatred. All they have is hatred. They don't ever give any specifics. They just say these blanket hate-filled statements. And I think Trump is doing a lot of good to try to race some of the Bidenflation to end wars all around the world. He's already done 6, and he's got designs on doing more. Why not just take some of his ideas seriously? And the thought that he's a wannabe dictator, remember, he thought he lost the 2020 election and then relinquished power anyway. And sure, he wasn't happy about it, but he did relinquish it. And then the Democrat Party, her party, did everything they could, as I document in this book here, as much as humanly possible, to try to make sure they used every legal and constitutional means possible and some extra constitutional means to try to make sure he was never president again. And Joe Biden said as much that he would assure that he would make sure that Trump would not be president again, using whatever means they could. And then they're saying that he's the dictator? No, they're the ones who don't believe in your right to choose your elected leaders. And that's what they have to offer. But there's something very heartening to me about this, which is that these are weak arguments. These are not sophisticated arguments. They're not persuasive arguments. They're just rooted in anger and emotion, not in substance, and not what's actually going to make your lives better as voters. That's where we are. The next clip I'm going to play for you after the break is going to blow your mind. This is the hottest thing on the internet right now. It is Joy Reid, and she takes the racism up to another level. You'll hear that after the break. Very nice. Beautiful stuff. Sean, well done. Keep me entertained here. All right. Alex Marlow in for the stage here. Happy to be here. Alex Marlow Show, Breitbart.com. I teased a great Joy Reid clip. I'm going to hold off on that for momentarily because the crew was suggesting that this clip of Chris Pratt, the movie star and son-in-law of Arnold Schwarzenegger on Bill Maher's podcast, was perhaps even more apropos of the discussion here. Let's play cut 12, please.
In politics, you inherit enemies, and when you jump on the bandwagon with who is the most divisive president ever, it makes sense that you're going to be made to look terrible, and so I don't know what to believe because it's not like I sit with Bobby and I go, so hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about. It's like we're just playing cards or playing Mafia or having fun or having dinner. I'm not going to pick his brain to find out exactly which of those things are true. I just kind of assume that none of them are. And for the most part, I wish him well, man. I hope there's certain things that he oversees that seem to be supported in a bipartisan way, like getting terrible toxic stuff out of our kids' food. I think that's a great thing. And so, if you do that, that's amazing. I'd hate to be so mired in hatred for the president that any success from his administration is something I'd have an allergic reaction to. To be like, oh, well, if they do it, I don't want it to happen. I'll put Clorox in my children's cereal myself. It's like, come on, be reasonable here. There's certain things that would be a good thing to have. I want them all to be successful.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So he's, I think, pretty open about being conservative, but I think he's more informed by his Christianity than necessarily sort of deep political I think inclinations, but I think everyone knows that he's a guy who leans right and is maybe the biggest movie star, at least in terms of a box office draw, that still leans right and is fairly open about it. And it's interesting because he's not a hardcore guy, a bomb thrower, Chris Pratt. But you see that when you get friends like Robert Kennedy Jr., who gets brought into the administration, a former Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, and the whole thing that he talks about is trying to end chronic disease and trying to make Americans healthier and try to keep kids healthier and try to make it so that the government isn't conspiring to keep us sick, and that certain sectors of our economy are conspiring to keep us sick and not make us well. And he wants to investigate some of these areas that have had a wide berth and have not had really a lot of scrutiny from the top of our government because the government's been in on it. And you're thinking, no, that's terrible, even though the guy's a Democrat and a Kennedy, then it starts making you think about the entire apparatus as perhaps being bogus. And I think that's one thing that a lot of Americans are wisening up to, but it's why we need to keep amplifying voices like this, just people who are willing to say, do not get yourself bogged down into blind hatred. Think for yourself. Think outside the box. Question things. And if you're able to do that, then America's going to be a lot better place. Thanks, Chris Pratt. Nice stuff. Good call, guys. I'm Alex Marlow, in for the Sage. We'll be back right after this. This is the Larry Elder Show. My name's Alexander Marlow. I'm the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and the host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast on the Salem Podcast Network 5 days a week, and also on the Salem News Channel on the weekends as well. They cut up my shows and make them really nice and packaged and beautiful for all of you. They do a nice job with them as well. I'm very pleased to be in for my friend, the Sage from South Central, and my former boss. Larry and I have a long and storied history where I reached out to him when I was just a young whippersnapper high school student, someone who'd been hooked on his radio show and had learned so much, as well as his books, in particular the 10 Things You Can't Say in America, which I literally carried around in my backpack to high school, Harvard Westlake High School in Los Angeles, California, famed school, one of the top schools in the country, and I was given all the libs a hard time thanks to all the angles that Larry was providing me. We struck up a friendship. I ended up going to work for him a little bit, and I used that to launch my life, really. And I ended up with Andrew Breitbart, and now I've been the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News for the last 11 years. And I become an author. I've written 3 books, all of them New York Times bestsellers. In the one that's on the list right now, it's called Breaking the Law. I'm holding up the book right there in front of you. And it's relevant today because I want to tell you guys why I wrote a book that goes into the weaponization of the legal system in this country. And some of you heard me talk about it a bit on yesterday's show, but we are way too casual about the nature of how the left has moved on from trying to guide our politics from Hollywood, the entertainment business, and the establishment media, many of which we've vanquished. And now they're trying to do it with a lawfare apparatus where they're normalizing the political persecution and the targeting of conservatives. And I was reminded of this just today when I came across during my due diligence that I do when I'm preparing for a show and checking out the New York Times and similar entities. And the reason why I do this is so that all of you don't have to. I try to keep up on the establishment media. You think they do that to us? Do you think the editor of the New York Times goes to Breitbart every day? I go to the New York Times multiple times because I want to make sure I know what the left is talking about. And they had an article, "In Pursuing Trump Rival, Weaponization Czar Sidesteps Justice Department Norms." So it took 4 authors to write this piece, named Jonah E. Bromwich, who I'm not familiar with, Glenn Thrush, who is a really sort of a comical figure in the journalism world in D.C., someone named Alan Fuhrer, also not news to me, and Michael S. Schmidt, who is the husband of, what's-her-face, Nicole Wallace, the MSNBC personality. So super neutral, professional Trump hater who gets millions of dollars a year to hate on Trump publicly. And they put in this piece, and it's a hit piece on Ed Martin. Ed Martin is a friend of mine. He's someone who is a patriot, someone who was anointed by Phyllis Schlafly to lead her Eagle Foundation after she passed. He's someone who filled in for me on radio when I was on Sirius XM a number of times. And Trump is appointed to 4 very important roles in his government that Ed has earned over a lifetime of contributions. Ed's also a bright guy, married to a doctor. He's got 4 children, and he's someone he's written books. he's a heavyweight. And so thus they want to take him off the playing field, and they want to do it by lying about him, by smearing him, and also by trying to humiliate him, which is another one of their moves. And that's part of what they did to Trump. It wasn't just about trying to bankrupt him and jail him. They also wanted to humiliate him. And I would direct you to the E. Jean Carroll absurd fake rape case if you would like more detail on that. All of it's documented in Breaking the Law. So I'm going through this piece, and it starts off with suggesting it's an absurd premise that Martin would want Tish James to resign, the New York Attorney General, who engaged in the most blatant targeted persecution of Donald Trump of all the ones that I document. She campaigned on going after Trump, and she immediately set to work doing that, and she did this at the expense of taking care of the citizens in New York, that she wasn't interested in crime. She wanted to go after crime. She wanted to make the cities safer. She didn't want to go after white-collar crime to make sure people weren't getting raw deals. No, she went after Donald Trump specifically. And what she did is she invented all sorts of different novel legal theories in order to attack him by using things that people had never done before. And with interest, fines assessed to President Trump ended up enumerating over $500 million, even though there wasn't a single complaint against Trump. Trump had supposedly defrauded businesses by inflating the value of his homes or his properties. All of this was ridiculous. Let me give you the best example that illustrates the point. Mar-a-Lago, her courtroom, which was run by a guy named Engeron, who was a very strange man, just a New York liberal, sort of garden variety, not super impressive, seemed very angry and mean. I go into his details in the book as well. But they estimated the value of Mar-a-Lago was $18 to $28 million. Okay, maybe for tax purposes, some assessor could give you that number. But if you go and try to buy a house in Palm Beach, Florida, where Mar-a-Lago is, and you want a 1-acre property, you're probably looking at about $40 million. If you would like a 2-acre property, those are more rare, you're probably looking at 150, maybe 200 million. Mar-a-Lago not only is one of a kind, touching the ocean and then the lake or the inlet that's behind it, whatever that thing is called. I got to commit that to memory. It's sea to lake. That's what Mar-a-Lago means. You know how big Mar-a-Lago is? 17 acres. So you can do the math on that. This thing could be worth $2 billion. And Trump had assessed its value about $750 million, which he could have underestimated his own property there. But they accused him of overestimating it 2,200% because they used some sort of county assessor's tax estimate that it's 18 to 28 million. It's completely ridiculous, and obviously this was a dead giveaway that this was a political persecution. Another dead giveaway that it was a political persecution is that James came into office and said flat out she's looking forward to suing Trump and then going home. That was what she was going to do. She said this flat out. And when she was elected in their interim, while she was transitioning into the job, she was going on left-wing social media pages, TikTok and Instagram pages, gloating how they're going to sue his ass and how they're not going to forget her name. So that's where she was about. And then now you got the New York Times defending her and attacking the guy who asked her politely that it'd be good faith if she stepped aside, considering that she led a targeted political persecution against the president, and right now still is in control of $175 million of his money, which he has up on bond. Now, other than me and Sean, there's no one in the building who could handle a $175 million bond right now. And I don't even think me and Sean could be president and deal with that when someone's got... Look, Trump's wealth is enormous, but is not necessarily liquid. He's got properties. He's got some of the best golf courses in the world. He's got some of the best hotels in the world. His properties are exquisite. But I don't know if it's easy for Trump to just say, can I get $500 million right now cash? That is a completely different level of wealth. And I don't know this world that well, but I've been in contact with enough billionaires to know that there's billionaires that have paper wealth, and then there's billionaires that have property wealth. Then there's billionaires that have liquid billions. That's exceedingly rare. There's a handful of people who can just, I got your 500 mil right here. What kind of bills would you like it in? That's rare. And so to ask that of Trump is punitive, cruel and unusual, violations of due process. But the due process thing is the most important. Cruel and unusual punishment, obviously. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot have political persecution in this country if you are not abiding by due process rights. And that's what was not afforded to Trump. And so they're going after Ed Martin with all of these dog whistles, saying that he's clad in a trench coat. And they're getting mad because he's posing for pictures for the New York Post, which is a right-of-center publication. And each of Martin's actions violate the Justice Department rules and norms. Okay, well, let me give you an example of the Justice Department rules and norms that are getting violated. Jack Smith, the special counsel that waged 2 monster cases against Trump between the midterm election and the general election. So right in the heat of the campaign season, when Trump is running for president, his whole appointment, his entire office was unconstitutional. There was nothing constitutional about the Jack Smith appointment, and that's what got figured out, but it took 18 months to figure it out. 18 months of investigations and subpoenas and interviews and targeted harassment and leaking in the Washington Post all the goods against Trump to try to campaign against him. So that was what the Justice Department was up to in the last administration. And now they got one guy who's looking into some of the perpetrators of the lawfare, and they say, yeah, well, maybe she should resign and just spare all of us this. And she won't, because she lives to go after Trump. More dog whistles. Martin later appeared on Fox News. They all just want to say that they're pandering to a base. They're not just doing that. They're trying to hold people accountable. And that's what Martin's all about. So the New York Times writes the Department of Justice is not supposed to they're supposed to avoid turning their investigation into public spectacles. Public spectacles like maybe taking a mugshot of President Trump. Now, I know that was the court down in Georgia that did that, but you don't think that's a public spectacle? What's the point of mugshots? Pop quiz for all of you. The point of mugshots is mostly to help victims and the public to identify the bad guys. So when you have the most recognizable person on the planet who's currently running for president of the United States, you don't need to put them through that humiliating ritual, yet that's exactly what they did. Because why? They're making let me read it, quote, the investigations into public spectacles. That's what they were doing. That's the whole point of it. And so the New York Times writes this as if we weren't living and breathing over the last 6 to 10 years in this country, watching all this play out. The request that Ms. James resign is particularly unusual because it appears the Justice Department is trying to harness its criminal powers to accomplish one of Trump's political goals. That was the essence of what Kiss James was all about. And all of these people don't think they should be held to the same standards. They think they're 2 tiers of justice. More when we come back. I'm Alex Marlow. Alex Marlow here, in for the Sage from South Central, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, friend to Larry Elder and to all dogs. It's true. We like dogs here on the Elder Show and the Alex Marlow Show, my podcast on the Salem Podcast Network. I am reading a New York Times article that has 4 bylines on it and reminded me of why I wrote the book Breaking the Law, which is on the New York Times bestseller list right now, about the weaponization of our judicial system against President Trump and his supporters. It's a hit piece on Ed Martin, and it's got all of the telltale signs that this is a New York Times piece. Too many bylines. It starts with a lot of ominous dog whistles, like he wears a trench coat, he goes on Fox News. Now we get to another classic, which is now they appeal to authority with some sort of a professor who acts like everything is uncouth that's going on right now. After they say that Martin is seeking retribution, as if that wasn't the sort of thing that Joe Biden's administration was doing against President Trump, they cite someone named Barbara L. McQuaid from the University of Michigan Law. Says, I'm tempted to describe their conduct as amateurish, so always mocking, always smug. But the consequences can be grave because they have enormous power at the Justice Department. So they're saying that these guys are dumb and stupid, but also that this is unprecedented because they're so evil. She goes on. Worried about long-term consequences of the public trust in the department itself, because people will see the department as yet one more weapon and tool of politics instead of independent law enforcement agency it's supposed to be. So let me ask you, does she think none of us paid attention to what happened when we found out Jack Smith's entire office was unconstitutional? The Department of Justice created of whole cloth a harassment arm in the middle of an election, signed off by Joe Biden and Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco and Vanita Gupta and all the people who were running that place. They act like we're too dumb to realize what was happening and who these people were. The article goes on. More telltale signs. You're reading a New York Times piece. They quote Abby Lowell, who is Tish James's attorney, who, of course, has tough words for Donald Trump and Pam Bondi, never noting that Abby Lowell is also Hunter Biden's attorney. So they don't do the background, that this is all a left-wing cabal. You get the left-wing professors, you get the left-wing attorneys, you get the left-wing writers married to Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. And they're all coming together to act like what we're doing is not normal after we witness them use all of these new fangled interpretations of the law to politically persecute our nominee for president. And so that we wouldn't have the choice of who to vote for. That's what they wanted here. And all of this is designed to subvert our democracy. The same people who are claimed to be the stewards of democracy from the article, even in his short time on the job, Ed Martin has become impatient with the pace of investigative work, pressing local prosecutors to move more quickly, according to 3 people familiar with the actions. Good. Can we get a towel? Is there a towel, Larry Elder? So I want to snap a towel. I want to wave it over my head right now. Good. Let's get the investigations moving quickly. This is what we want. This is why Ed Martin's in the job. To current and former Justice Department officials, this is the worst part. Check this out. Mr. Martin is equal parts comic relief and existential threat, meaning he's both the most evil guy you've ever met. He's a threat to all things holy, but he's also hilarious because he's so dumb and foolish. So they try to hit us from every angle. They're trying to demoralize us. They're trying to take our ability to operate. They're trying to do things to take things from us so that we are not on an equal playing field to them. They're the only ones who can actually wield executive power. We're not allowed to do it. Once we try to wield executive power, it becomes illegal. Another crucial part in the article. And the Office of the Special Counsel, an independent federal watchdog agency, this month eagerly confirmed that it was investigating Jack Smith. So they add eagerly. They add the adjective in there. I guess it's an adverb. And they added in there just to give you a sign that we do not approve. That's the New York Times doing the little dog whistle to their audience. We do not approve of what's going on over there. Eagerly confirmed that it was investigating Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor who twice indicted Mr. Trump. The inquiry into whether Mr. Smith violated a law that prohibits federal workers from using their government jobs to engage in political activity appears to be theater, given that the most severe penalty is dismissal from federal employment. Mr. Smith left government at the start of the year. We don't know that. These guys aren't all attorneys. And let me tell you, each one of these 6 cases that I document in Breaking the Law that went after Trump employed novel legal theories. They employed parts of the law that we didn't know existed. There's no statutes for them. There's no precedent for them. And when there was precedent, always backed up President Trump. But these are the exact people who extended the law to the furthest extent imaginable to try to bust Trump. And they're acting as though we're crazy because we would investigate an unconstitutional guy appointed by Joe Biden's government, met repeatedly with Joe Biden's White House, had answered to no one, and was clearly there to rig an election on behalf of Democrats. The fact that we want to look into how that guy got appointed, who knew what and when. You know what I was thinking about today? We didn't even know the details of the Mar-a-Lago raid. There's a magistrate judge that appointed that was for it. But you know that Merrick Garland had to have signed off on the Mar-a-Lago raid. He's Department of Justice. He's the Attorney General. And then they didn't raid him for 3 days. And then after the raid, which was truly insane, see the footage if you haven't seen it already, then it wasn't for 3 days where Garland finally owned up to it and said, yeah, I did it. It was me. Why did Garland wait 3 days? Either he wasn't proud of it, or he had no idea what was going on and it just happened, and then he finally said, well, I better act like I know what's going on in my own Department of Justice. This is so unacceptable. This is completely ridiculous that that went on in our country. It's absurd at any other time. And it only could have happened to President Trump. And we've shown not sufficient, I would say, curiosity to get in the bottom of this stuff. And these non-lawyers, maybe one of them is a lawyer, I don't know, but they're not all lawyers. And they want to tell us that, hey, it's case closed. Jack Smith's a great guy. And all he would have done is he would have lost his job. There's nothing potentially illegal about it. Well, I'll tell you what, there's nothing illegal about the Stormy Daniels case that ended up in criminal convictions against Donald Trump that Donald Trump was doing. There was no campaign violations in Donald Trump paying with his business to keep someone who's going to trash talk him publicly to not trash talk him publicly during an election. There's nothing illegal about that. And yet they found out a way not only to make it illegal, they found out a way to make it 34 felonies. It's outrageous. It really is. And I'm trying to get all of you guys hyped up about this because not only do these people need to be investigated, some of them need to be perp walked, some of them need to be handcuffed, of course. But we the people can't let these guys ever get power again. And this is the whole point that I really want to get to with this, is that no matter what happens, no matter where this thing goes, no matter where these specific investigations go, how many there are, and do they bear fruit? And I hope they do, and they should. But what Ed Martin says here is so important, and this is way deep in the article, on like the 4th page that I'm reading out of 5. If they can't be charged, if they can be charged, we will charge them. But if they can't be charged, we will name them. And we will name them, and in a culture that respects shame, they should be people that are ashamed. That's right. It used to be a significant thing in this country. Your name used to matter. And you're now allowed to drag people's names through the mud. And if you're on the left, if you're a political card-carrying Democrat, not only do you get away with it, you get toasted at cocktail parties. You get awards. You get Emmys if you do that. That's not the America I want my kids to grow up in. Now's our chance to fight back. That's why we love guys like Ed Martin here. And that's why we need to be steely-eyed. We need to be clear-eyed on this. We are fighting back right now. And we are going to name and shame everyone who deserves it. That's the mission here. I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of The Alex Marlow Show, author of the book Breaking the Law. In for the Sage. We'll be right back. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, how are you, Alex?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy we're doing this. So couple of housekeeping things. So this will go out on my podcast tomorrow, but this is live radio on the Larry Elder Show, which is nationwide. So I do have to do the radio formulamatic. So there'll be breaks that we got to take in the middle of the talk, which won't show up in the podcast, but will show up in the radio. Do you have a hard out?
No.
Okay, great. So the most we'll go is a half an hour. And then in terms of plugs, really important. What can I plug for you?
My podcast is called The Numbers Game with Ryan Girdusky.
Okay.
I have a National Populist newsletter on Substack.
Yeah,
and
the
I'm
Substack
founder of the
is great.
76 Project.
Yeah,
thank you. You read it?
Yeah. What is the Substack address?
It's just, you can get it. I think it's, hold on one second. I think it's natpopnews.com. 1 second. No, it's not. What is the sub? I used to have a shorthand and I don't know what it is. It is just substack.com at natpopnews. At natpop. That's it. Yeah.
Just natpop. Got it. Cool. And then, what was the last thing?
I am the founder of the 1776 Project.
What is that? Do I know that?
School board elections. We do school board elections nationwide.
Great. Okay, cool. And then in terms of topics, I read your great redistricting thing, which I'm kind of pro redistricting, but I loved your just sort of explanation of it. So I definitely want to talk about that.
A whole podcast and Substack about it tomorrow. So I'm very knee deep in research.
Okay, good. So let's do that. But just remember, it's going to go fast. Like it's going to feel a lot shorter than we'll really need. So keep it as.
I've done radio before.
Yeah, it just I'm talking to myself too, just because of the nature of the I love the digressive podcast stuff. Okay, and then I want to get the Mamdani stuff. And then I just did a 30-minute monologue on Lawfare. And do you have any opinion on anything that's going on in terms of?
No, I mean it's not my wheelhouse.
Okay, good. So I'll just do a hard pivot. Okay, good. I was just gonna give you a chance just because by way of segue. All right.
No, but I knew you wrote the new book, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's fun to do it. I was just teeing off.
Like a race. Has Alex produced more books or babies in the last 5 years?
I have to write one for each baby so I can afford the baby. So that's you might decide that you're in that group soon. It was baby Chew. It was baby Chew, and I was like, oh, I gotta get a book going. Like I gotta figure out get some revenue going. Okay. I am Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, longtime fan and friend of Larry Elder and protege. And with me now is a great guest, Ryan Girdusky, one of the most productive and high-energy people in the conservative movement, and I would say a ultra smart an analyst of what's going on these days. He's got a podcast, The Numbers Game. You guys can check that out. A terrific Substack at NatPop. So the Substack is called NatPop, National Populism. natpop.substack.com for that as well. And that was where, Ryan, I came across a really deep analysis that you did in the redistricting that's going on. And this is a big battle. There's a lot of nuance. Oh yeah, we got to do the welcome. How come we're not doing Alan Parsons Project though? Like we got to do. Can that be my thing? Can we do that? I want the Chicago Bulls, Alan Parsons Project. Whenever we get the new guest, we may as well. You know what? I'm just gonna do it on the Marlow Show. Like why not? Like we'll just make that official. I'll talk to Misty about that later on. But Ryan, you broke down, I think, efficiently what's really happening in Texas and how it's going to apply to the rest of the country. So let me just let you cook for a second. What's going on? What's at stake? And why now? All of that.
Look, I think that the Texas legislators are taking a very big bet on the direction of the state. If you look at the 2020, 2024 elections, both elections, Hispanics in the state, Hispanics nationwide, but Hispanics in the state moved to the right, and they can redraw South Texas to ensure that they are safe Republican seats and a few pockets out in Houston and Dallas, and they can draw majority minority seats that are Republican for the first time really ever in a very safe way. So they don't mind sitting there and then plenty of seats that are R plus 30, R plus 20 to cut all the extra fat from. But for the first time, they can sit there and really draw safe Republican minority seats, and they're going to sit there and take the gamble because in such a national environment as it is, the number of seats that we would see change in wave elections like we did in 2010, 2014, or 2018 even, are very, very few. You know, there's probably 20 to 25 seats that may decide the House of Representatives next election. So those 5 seats make a big, big, big deal. And they think that this is the gamble that could save the Republican House leadership, Senate Speaker Johnson's leadership, rather, in 2026.
Okay, so what is the historical precedent here? And an addendum to that, what's the alternative to letting the party in power draw their seats? I mean, what what realistically could be done that's different?
So okay, as far as red as Texas has been, right? Texas used to be just as blue, and throughout the 80s and the 90s, Texas Democrats, specifically one congressman whose last name was Frost, Martin Frost was his first name. He was a Dallas congressman. He represented the seat that Beth Van Dyne now represents. He used to tactfully cut up Texas to make sure that Republicans really couldn't get a foothold. And as the generations changed and as the politics changed, eventually they kind of ran out of space and the Republicans took hold. But they spent probably 30 years without the opportunity to ever gain the majority. So Republicans, especially Republicans who are older than the people who live on Twitter, sit there and say, you know, we dealt this blow for decades where we had to, you know, sit there, even though we had the majority of the vote, we're a minority of representatives. So now it's our turn to sit there and carve up the state as we well wish. It goes back for decades. What are the alternatives? There's a lot of them. A lot of states do independent redistricting right now, which is usually partisan, even though it's not as openly partisan as, let's say, like New Mexico or Illinois, where Republicans are really locked out. But there's a partisan effort to do independent redistricting. My opinion has always been that states should sit there and redistrict where if a county should encompass an entire county should be encompassed within a congressional district. In other words, you have to encompass an entire county before you can move on to the next one. And that's how you should work throughout congressional districts. Now, obviously, it would get a little hairy here or there, but it would prevent these districts like in Illinois or in New Mexico, where they've sliced, you know, right through different city centers to make sure the Republicans can never get, you know, their foothold. A method like that, I think, would be much more fair than what's being proposed by a lot of other places right now.
Is there any momentum behind that? Because it sounds great the way you draw it up. It just feels like a bell that you can't unring. And I feel like when I was a younger person and, you know, George Bush was president and we all played by the marquee of Queensberry rules, like a pre-Obama America, I feel like maybe this could have happened. But I feel like now that seems like that ship may have sailed. I'm not saying that's a good thing or bad thing. I'm just saying I'm doing a vibe check.
Yeah, I mean, some states kind of have it. Iowa basically has it. And look, it wouldn't protect against all gerrymandering, but it would stop the most egregious cases of gerrymandering, right? You could still gerrymander to a certain degree, but it means like Los Angeles County couldn't bleed into Orange County to make sure that Orange County is bluer than it is. But you could gerrymander within the county. It's not a perfect answer, but it is a better answer. Iowa kind of has that model. Yeah. And a few other places have done it, but no one has done it perfectly. It's something I might actually pitch around because you're not the first person to say it's a really good idea. I think it is actually a really good idea to deal with this, you know, in the cases of places like New Jersey or Texas or California or New York.
Yeah, and I'm curious the process of how that would come to be. Ryan, when we come back, I'm going to get you to handicap whether or not what California is doing could be effective, whether or not Republicans could get beat at our own game on this thing, and what's likely to come. We'll be right back. The announcer's not wrong. We do have some time for calls coming up. I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlow Show. Ryan Girdusky is on with me. He's got the Numbers Game podcast and the Nat Pop newsletter on Substack, and one of the, I would say, most knowledgeable young conservatives out there. Ryan, I want to talk to you about the redistricting math here. So if Texas is going to do it, and they're going to redistrict, and Gavin Newsom is going to simultaneously do the thing where he says that we cannot redistrict because that's immoral, but also I'm going to redistrict harder than Texas at the same time because he gets away with that stuff. Then what happens? The dominoes are going to fall. I feel like I did the back of the napkin math, and this could be good for Republicans, but what do you think actually, how does this play out? Because which states are going to get involved, and who's going to pull it off?
So Republicans have a much easier path to pick up seats because the Republican-controlled states that don't need to work within the court system and the legislature and the governor can draw the map alone make up a lot more. You have Indiana, you have Florida, which can still pull out 2 or 3 more Democratic seats. You'd have Georgia, which, I mean, the VRA kind of holds things up a little bit, but if that's stricken unconstitutional, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, then that would be a game changer on the entire Deep South. There's definitely more Republican seats available because they played fair the first time during redistricting. Democrats really don't have much to turn to. Oregon, Illinois, and Maryland are the only Democrat-controlled states that still have Republican districts in them. California is going to make this move, and Gavin Newsom is going to sit there and go ahead to try to do this redistricting, but it has to have a vote by the people first. That's the same situation in New York, same situation in New Jersey. They would all take ballot measurements because their state constitution forbids mid-cycle redistricting and partisan redistricting. That would be very problematic for Kathy Hochul and for Phil Murphy. The reason you're hearing Gavin Newsom talk about it more than Kathy Hochul, who said a bit, and Phil Murphy has said it basically not at all. But the reason you're hearing it talk more is because it's a ploy to sit there and say, I'm the toughest person to take on Trump. I'm taking on Trump right now. Please think of me as a presidential candidate. It's really a ploy for president because there's no guarantee it's even going to happen in California.
So one thing I always look in the context of Trump won't be here forever. Best case scenario, 2036, he's gone. And so there's going to be another president someday. And could we get hoisted on our own petard here? I'm not overly concerned about this on a personal level, Ryan, because I feel like the Democrats are always looking to rig the game to beat us however they can. And they're not going to wait for us to set precedent that, okay, this is fair game now. But overall, is this something where you feel like we could get burned if we go too far down this road right now in the redistricting game?
I think that they could get over their skis and assume certain trend lines will stay the way that they are. It's very interesting. The California redistricting, for example, they could have gone much further than they actually did. They could have actually taken out more Republicans, but they spend more time shoring up Democrats in Latino majority areas because they think the Latino vote is going to move further to the right. And they don't know how further to the right, but they worked harder on protecting incumbents than they did necessarily on taking out Republicans, which is very interesting. If Republicans overstate the idea that maybe the minority vote will continue endlessly down that road, or that suburban whites will continue holding up their numbers, or that the populations just won't change as populations always do. Politics is not a pond, it's a river. Things are constantly moving. Then yeah, absolutely they can get over their skis, and we'll see where that goes. But right now it's just Texas. It doesn't look like Indiana's following them. It doesn't look like Missouri's following them. We'll see what happens with Florida. New Hampshire already said no. So it might just be a Texas versus California gamble. And we'll see if the people of California vote against it, because that's ultimately who decides this.
Yeah, interesting. And unfortunately, because of Larry Elder's personal experience, I don't trust the people of California, even though I am one and I like some of my friends. But it is unfortunately quite predictable how these things go. Newsom's also a national candidate right now. He's running for president right now. And he's doing these things where he's empowered sort of snarky Gen Z type people to run his social media, which is not making up for, I think, a lot of his failed policies, which I think the taxpaying citizens of California are getting increasingly frustrated with the crime and the lack of fire prevention and the fact that nothing he ever campaigned to do has actually happened. We are staring down the barrel at $8 a gallon gas here on the horizon, potentially in the state. That's not a joke. You can look that up. And he's out there, tweeting at J.D. Vance all day. Does this work? Maybe it's not even a negative. Maybe it's not a positive. I don't know. Is this doing anything for anyone is my question.
Well, I mean, listen, look at who he is as a man, Gavin Newsom, right? When we had the racial reckoning of 2020, he wanted to have reparations in California for descendants of slaves, even though there were basically no slaves in California, to my knowledge, and California was on the side of the Union during the Civil War. Then when Biden was nominee, he was Biden's biggest defender. The man is perfectly fine. Don't look away.
Yes.
He's perfectly great. Then after the election, he had Steve Bannon on his podcast, and he had Charlie Kirk, and now he's the bipartisan
Those are good
guy,
episodes.
And now he's the resistor.
Right.
He's the man for all seasons. Gavin Newsom is whoever he needs to be at any given moment. This man could shed his skin faster than a snake. So does it do anything? He thinks he has to be the fighter right now. If that changes, Gavin Newsom will change, because Gavin Newsom is, if anything, a political survivor, because he wants more than anything to run for president. And he thinks this is the current method. If this changes, he will change with it.
Yeah, voting against him is also a mistake too. So I just say this for anyone who's too confident in our prospects. Ryan, I want to spend the rest of the time turning to your home state of New York and your city of New York, where you live. So there's a good segue here, because I am a little confused at the alarm over Mamdani, only that I'm going through all this in California and no one cares about us. Everyone is not sympathetic at all. And then we're being asked to be very sympathetic to the plight you guys are going through in New York. I guess I am, but maybe that's because I kind of am a little nice. But it's give me your 30,000 foot, and then we'll get more granular after the break.
Well, I mean, the thing about California is Californians barely care about their own politics. New Yorkers, we have a lot less going on for us. We don't have the beach and the sun. So, so I think that for New York right now, it is scary, because we were the city that was governed by Republican mayors for 20 years. Eric Adams has been not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination, but not Bill de Blasio. And we really thought that we were getting away from the politics of far left progressivism. It was going to be just moderate Democrats and establishment Democrats. And right now, Mamdani's election is a bellwether. Will we have a Chuck Schumer as a senator? I used to say yes, absolutely. I don't know anymore. Kristen Gillibrand, I would probably guess no. Kathy Hochul, who knows? And when you're one of the largest states in the nation sitting there and saying, nope, pedal to the metal to the far left, that's a really, really big question, as not only the face of the state, but the face of the party as a whole, the party of the nation. I mean, how many Democrats are made up in Illinois, New Jersey, New York, and California? It's a majority of the coalition. It is the future of the party. And what we're looking at for is not if there will be a Mamdani, he can't run for president, but an AOC president. It's not a if, it's a when. That's what Mamdani looks like.
Interesting. So then the question is going to be for you, what changed and what do we go from here after the break with Ryan Girdusky? I'm Alex Marlow. Be right back. All right, Marlow in for the stage again. Ryan Girdusky is my guest. You can go to ryangirdusky.com or follow him on X, the Everything app, where he has a really nice account there. 1776 Project PAC. He's got the National Populist Substack and the Numbers Game podcast. All recommends in my book. Ryan, two-part question for you. What changed in Manhattan so that a Mamdani is possible? And where do we go from here, assuming he wins?
Well, I would sit there and say that there are 5 boroughs in New York, right? Here's a little numbers game for you right now. In 3 of the 5 boroughs over the last year, Republicans have had more new registered voters than Democrats, in the Bronx, in Staten Island, and in Queens. Only in Brooklyn and Manhattan have Democrats continued to outpace that of Republicans. What has changed is that working class peoples of all ethnicities are leaving the Democratic Party. And new ones, either they're dying, they're moving, or they're not registering, or they're changing parties to Republicans. And so the coalition that gave Democrats, Ed Koch is far gone. The coalition that gave them Eric Adams is gone. And the coalition that people who are attracted to Mamdani are increasingly Muslim immigrants, Southwest Asian immigrants, Southeast Asian immigrants being, Bangladeshis and whatnot, Indians, and white hipsters. Those are the two groups predominantly that really created the coalition that Mamdani used. And New York City, like California, is a sponge for progressives across the country. If you're going to be a blue-hair progressive, why would you stay in Kentucky? Come to New York City, come to Brooklyn. So those two things are working in tandem, and that is happening across the nation. Working class people of all shapes and sizes in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Florida and across this place are, and California even too. California Republicans are registering more new voters than Democrats. In every part of this country, working class people are saying enough of the Democratic Party and their far left policies. So who is left? It is the most extreme. And that is why it's not a question of a when, not an if we will have an AOC style presidential candidate on the Democratic side. It is a when.
Yeah, I think 100% the party is beholden to that left-wing base. And you really do some good math here, because it does seem like a lot of the people who are just knee-jerk left-wing, factory-setting left-wing, do try to move to New York. You've got the immigrant population coming in who is there, and then you've got the people who are victimized by the wokeification of schools and corporations, and people get wrapped up. They're all in New York. So it makes sense it's going to go left. So then the question is, what do we do? Because we don't want this to fan out in the rest of the country. So is that your fear, and what's the pushback?
I think that for the rest of the country, if you're like in Pennsylvania or an important state like that, and you have party registrations, is to continue to work for make sure that working class people continue to register Republican. Look, New York, in the Bronx, right? The Bronx is one of the most left-wing counties in America. It has moved almost 40 points to the right from 2012 to 2024. 40 points in one of the bluest county that has no Republican infrastructure, just people manifestly on their own sitting there and saying, I am done with this party. Part of it will happen in our favor. The biggest mistake Josh Shapiro has made so far is doing automatic voter registration, because white working class people who didn't intend to vote are now automatically registered to vote. Continue the momentum to make sure people register to vote and get them active. And I think it's going to happen organically, but press Republicans to be the populist party for working class people. Give working class people a place to go.
Thank you, Ryan. Fantastic analysis. Ryan Girdusky. I'm Alex Marlow. This is the Larry Elder Show. That is a pleasure to hear that intro. My name is Alex Marlow. I'm the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a former Larry Elder intern, in for the Sage yet again today, and having a great time with all of you. If you are interested in the stuff that I do, Breitbart.com is the place to go for all the latest news. I would say the most influential conservative news source, period. Fox might kind of make a claim to that, but you know what? We're at the cutting edge with the base. I think we got it. We're the spot to be. Got the Alex Marlow Show podcast, a Breitbart podcast, but as part of the Salem Network. So I'm on 5 days a week, wherever you get your podcasts. And then on the weekends, if you're a Salem News Channel viewer, you can check out my show there as well. The new book, Breaking the Law, out now in the New York Times bestseller list. Thank you all for checking that out. That's my primer into the major cases and future investigations that's going to take place to all the people that did you wrong and did President Trump wrong in the run-up to the 2024 election, plus what we do from here. And it starts with all of you being fired up and engaged, which hopefully we play a small part here at Salem and at Breitbart and on The Elder Show. All right, we got a lot to get to this hour in terms of news, a lot of things on my mind. I'm going to play an unbelievable Joy Reid clip I've been promising all day. But first, I do want to fire up some of these phones here. We got Craig in Anderson, South Carolina. Craig, what's going on? You're on 888-971-SAGE.
Yeah, I'm just amazed by how many people don't realize that our country is basically gone. There's so many Marxists in the government, it's pathetic. Both the Bush administration, George H.W. and little George W., they were world government people. That means anti-U.S. Constitution. How many times did you hear George H.W. say the New World Order? That's world government.
It is world government.
Bernie Sanders, those nitwits up in Vermont, keep sending that communist back to the U.S. Senate. I'm so sorry, but the country is just Biden. There's another guy. He's been a racist and a Marxist all his life. Racist. He teamed up with Ted Kennedy to try and keep Thomas off of the Supreme Court. It's just pathetic. It amazes me.
Yeah, I will tell you quickly about Biden, who I researched deeply for my second book, Breaking Biden. He's got a racist streak, but he's really mostly just a BSer. And I don't ever think he was a committed Marxist. He just thought that was the path to getting himself self-aggrandizement. And he achieved that. But I will tell you, to your first point about the Bushes, this is part of how I cut my teeth in the conservative movement, is that I grew up on Larry. I grew up on people who I think were skeptical of the establishment of the Republican Party. Larry was a registered libertarian for a very long time. And so I was always naturally a little contrarian. But when we lost that election in 2012 with Mitt Romney, and then the Republican Party put out this autopsy report that it was really because we weren't for amnesty, that we didn't want to legalize all the illegal aliens in this country. That's why we lost. That was the last straw for me, and it was the last straw for, I think, a lot of people in this country who were thinking, oh no, this is a plot to replace Americans with the world, and even the Republicans are in on it. And I really think that's sort of the dawn of where MAGA came from. So, Craig, it's a really great flashback that you have here, because it's a reminder the Republican Party most of my life, and I'm not an old guy, was for a world government. That they believed in that ideal that we were going to eventually get to a world government.
Yep. Rhinos, every one of them, all of them, both Bushes were rhinos. It's pathetic. But and then Joe McCarthy, I don't remember if you're old enough, like I said, I'm 84 years old, and I remember Joe McCarthy in the early 50s when they censored him. Well, come to find out, if you follow the story all the way through, there was revealed that there was more than 250 Russian spies in the FDR administration.
Right. So this is where, and thank you for the call, Craig. This is where it's interesting, because to the victor goes the history books too. I mean, what's the expression? There got to be an expression for this, but it's the whoever wins gets the control of the history books. So it's I'm not saying I want to dignify every tactic that was used during that time, but they were communists in the government, and that's clear. And so we use McCarthyite as a slur, but also he was kind of right about a lot of stuff. And it's one of these things that reminds you about the world, the way we're in it, that if you win, you can just write the history books for yourself. And that's why we need to win every time, because we can't allow the left to control the history books. Because think about what they'll write about people like me, what they'll write about people like Donald Trump. As time goes on, they'll write we're all the horrible things that we're not, because they hate us so much. And it's that same academic class that writes the history book, that writes the textbooks. I'll tell you, my wife, Mrs. Dr. Marlow, she is a medical doctor, but her number one textbook that she had on her counter when she was going through medical school, it had a name on it that might ring a bell to you. Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was the textbook writer for med schools. He didn't have the reputation he had now. His reputation was, hey, he was the guy who was helpful during AIDS, which I don't know if that was true. But that's who they tasked to write the books, is the people who are these government actors who are part of the establishment, part of the status quo, even when the status quo is not doing good enough for us. All right. Let me play clip for you. This is going to be a hard pivot, but I can't delay this anymore. I'll tell you that we look at the dials at Breitbart News, and we look at what's trending, where people are focused in their attention. And I will tell you, by far the most popular piece of content that we have going right now is this clip of Joy Reid, formerly Joy Ann Reid. Is she part of MS Now, or is she gone? Is she completely out of MS Now? Formerly known as MSNBC, but we learned this on yesterday's show. It's now MS Now. This is cut 17. We're waiting all day for this one. Let's do it, Sean.
They can't fix the history they did. Their ancestors made this country into a slave hell. But they can clean it up now because they got the Smithsonian. They can get rid of all the slavery stuff. They got PragerU. They can lie about the history to the children. They can't originally invent anything more than they ever were able to invent good music. We black folk gave y'all country music, hip hop, R&B, jazz, rock and roll. They couldn't even invent that, but they have to call a white man the king, because they couldn't make rock and roll. So they have to stamp the king on a man whose main song was stolen from an overweight black woman.
What's his main song? What was so an overweight black woman, his main song? I don't know. He has so many hits. I'm a huge Hound Dog. That's not even his best song. Suspicious Minds is his best song. Can't Help Falling in Love is his best song. He's had so many best songs. Can we play my wedding song, Sean, which is Can't Help Falling in Love? This is me and Mrs. Dr. Marlow, where it all began, romancing it up. Can you get a little bit of this? Does this sound like black music to you? Oh. This isn't black music. This isn't white music. It's just good music. This is totally unique. There's not another song like this. Please, if you differ with me, phone lines open at 888-971-SAGE. Clear out most of the lie. I want to hear this. I want to hear the retort to this. Give me a little Suspicious Minds, Sean, and then we'll move on from this. But this is just so ridiculous. No one takes Joy Reid seriously. I just want to play some Elvis today in the third hour of the Elder Show. That was the whole point of what we were doing. Taking advantage. I don't have access to all this type of stuff in the Marlow Show podcast. I don't have as big of a team as Larry earned over the years. So many spins in the Marlow house. It's just good stuff. And why is she so angry? She wants to take Elvis from people. So many things in that clip. First of all, you see how she stayed on the air, that she's able just to spin lie after lie. How many lies and falsehoods were in that 39-second clip? It had to be a half a dozen. But first of all, throwing down on PragerU, one of the most highest integrity, one of the best groups imaginable. I was at an event for PragerU over the weekend. Dinesh D'Souza was there. I mean, all the great people there were part of PragerU. All they're trying to do is try to, preserve Israel, preserve the Holy Land, try to make sure that Islamo-Nazi radicals aren't blowing it up. Like, that's their MO. And Joy Reid thinks, no, they're rewriting the history books to write out the black people. It's just such an absurdity. And hopefully this is falling on deaf ears. But you don't want to play the game with white European cultures of who's created the best music. Black American music has been unbelievable. Black American music has been so influential on modern day America, really the last 100 years. You can't tell the story of America without the story of black music. And I've studied this. I'm a music minor at UC Berkeley, studied jazz at UC Berkeley. I get this. I know this history. But you don't want to play this game when you're talking about the canon of music in all of humanity. You want to take the Baroque period. You want to take the classical period. You want to take the Renaissance period of music. There's a lot of white guys. Not all of them straight, by the way. A lot of homosexual white guys, too, if you want to play that. If you want to get some woke points in there. But a lot of white guys writing that music if we're going to go down that road. But what's the obsession with taking away Elvis? Because he happened to grow up in the South? I don't get that. That is just such a weird thing that they've got, that they hate so much. And I'll connect this to the modern politics that we got today, which is that Trump comes up with an obvious idea, like let's make D.C. safe again, or let's actually have a border. Let's prioritize citizens over illegal aliens. And then let's just make sure that not every woman loses their spot in a swim team to a male. And everyone goes, no, it's a bad idea. No, that's the left just being stupid. It's Marlow here, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlow Show. The new book, Breaking the Law, is out now. I will do one shameless additional plug for it. 5-star reviews all around on it. This is from a 5-star performance, 5-star story audio review of the book, The True Fact Checker That Progressives Don't Want Us to Know About. That's me saying the book is incredibly thoughtful, thoroughly researched. A young man named Jordan Allen's written this, saying that Breaking the Law is an A-plus piece of work from Alex, solidifies him as one of the most important voices within the conservative movement of my generation. Thank you. Appreciate that. And he also says he likes my stories that I tell about family members, like, for example, Dancing with Mrs. Dr. Marlow, to some Elvis, which is uniquely Elvis. Elvis is a wonderful, wonderful artist. Why are we playing this tit for tat game? I shouldn't even take Joy Reid seriously. She's just a content creator. I'll play it again. Let's run it back, Sean, before we go to the phone to hear from some of you chiming in on this. But I cannot even believe that this passes for a smart analysis on the left at MS Now. Here we go.
They can't fix the history they did. Their ancestors made this country into a slave hell. But they can clean it up now because they got the Smithsonian. They can get rid of all the slavery stuff. They got PragerU. They can lie about the history to the children. They can't originally invent anything more than they ever were able to invent good music. We black folk gave y'all country music, hip hop, R&B, jazz, rock and roll. They couldn't even invent that, but they have to call a white man the king. Because they couldn't make rock and roll.
We got it. We got it. She's cooked enough. She's cooked enough. It's pretty good. It's just you almost got to admire how irritating it is. That's a real skill to be that irritating. Will one of you guys look up for me if who invented peroxide, if it was a white person? Because she is dyeing her hair. She's got the blonde dye, which is such an odd look. Why did she steal Donald Trump's hairstyle? Why did she do that? He's in her head so much. Now he's on her head. She's got the Donald Trump cut, even though she's a woman of color, a POC. But again, you don't want to – I love the music from black American cultures, but why are we acting like it's the only good music there is and why we can't have our Elvis? It's because we got Beethoven and Bach and Vivaldi and Mozart too. So it's like I'm not sure I understand this. A French chemist. So, but there are black people in French. We don't know what that means. We got to figure that out. One of the producers had a hilarious point that she's going to have to make her living now that she's out on MS Now. She's going to have to be a podcaster. And I think the whites invented that one. It certainly feels like a white medium, the podcasting medium. Not to say that the stage doesn't have a great show. But she made an interesting point also about the Smithsonian that I want to point out. And I'll throw it to the phones. The Smithsonian is controlled by whites, but woke whites. woke whites that write the history in a way that push leftism in this country. And that's why Trump needs to take that back, and he needs to have a initiative. And this probably was the broader context of the clip, where people like PragerU are getting involved and going through it and saying, what is the actual truth here? And is this documented in our most prestigious national museums? That would be a useful thing to do. And I'll tell you, they're pretty diverse over there at PragerU. So I trust that not only will they be truthful and accurate, but they might have some pretty colors for you to look at when you see them pop up in media. All right, let's go to the phones. Joanne, L.A., California, you're on The Elder Show with Marlow. Throw it to Joanne, guys.
Okay, whatever their political points are, they lose me when they start knocking Elvis. Elvis did not steal from black people. He did a lot of the good music that he heard before him, just like every other artist does. Some was black, some came from white people. He evolved from what came before him.
Exactly. And Joanne, isn't it like saying that did I steal from the black talk show host because Larry was my favorite host growing up? Did I steal from Jewish talk show hosts because Dennis was my other favorite talk show host? It doesn't make any sense. Like, no one ever accused you of that. But music, you can do that?
Also, they did not give us country music. A lot of country music came from the Irish. Oh,
I did not know that history.
I know because I grew up in the South, and a lot of that old Southern twang was really... Well, a lot of this came from Ireland because the South is full of the Irish.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't care what you have to say. Leave Elvis out of it.
Yeah, exactly, Joanne.
He was and is the greatest artist of all time.
Now you're taking it a step further than I would, but I think one of the best in the American canon. Thanks, Joanne. Look, here's what we know about Elvis. Grows up in Tupelo, Mississippi. Big fan of B.B. King, Fats Domino, other legendary black artists. Okay. Are we penalizing him for this now? Is the point that he should only get influenced by, I don't know, Mama Cass? I mean, Mama Cass is probably what is it? I don't think I got the timeline right there, but you guys see what I'm saying? It's like you can only get white people music from that. What is the whitest band of all time? You guys producers, you guys can poll this, and I'll bring this. The audience, you could chime in too. It's Green Day, right? That's got to be the widest music. Green Day's got to be the widest music ever, right? I mean, I think that's done. We don't even need to do a poll. It's Green Day. But here's the point: don't we want to have America where we are that melting pot, where we do benefit from diversity, where diversity is our strength? It's not our strength if Joy Reid, with her Donald Trump haircut, is saying that Elvis can't draw off of black artists. He can only draw off of white. That's the most racist thing imaginable. Anyway, it's good. Bring her and Jasmine Crockett out there and let them be the face of the movement. Let's go to Carl, West Hills, California. Carl, what's going on?
Hello.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Hound Dog, the one that he supposedly stole from a black woman.
Yeah.
Actually, it was written by Lieber and Stroller, a couple of Jewish guys. So I guess Big Mama Thornton, who did it, the big black woman, I guess she stole from Jewish people.
Wow. That's what I'm saying. Why would we want to have it so that you can only borrow from people who have your same skin tone when you're an artist? Isn't every artist influenced by those who walk before us? I mean, don't we all walk on the shoulders of giants if you get to the top of your field? Is there anyone who's free from that? Is there anyone who just came into the world with even 1% of the world's knowledge? Of course not. We're all benefiting from other people in the past. So it just... can someone run down that history for me? I want to make sure that Carl's on point here. But Carl, do you think this is an effective tactic rhetorically? Do you think it's effective rhetorically is my question, where people on the left are trying to take Elvis back right now? They have no power, so now they're just griping on podcasts about Elvis.
It's nothing new. It's probably been going on before Joy Reid was born. They asked Carl Perkins, a white guy, about blue suede shoes. He had a big hit with it, an Elvis contemporary, and Elvis did it, and he had a huge hit. He probably sold twice as many records as Carl Perkins, and they asked, are you upset with Elvis for doing this? He's like, no, I wish he did all my music, because he got paid for it. And that was one thing about Elvis. They told him, if you change these songs a little bit more, if you listen to Big Mama Thornton's version of Hound Dog, Dog and his version completely different. And they said, if you change these songs a little bit more, you can claim that you wrote them. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So he always made sure that the writers, whether they be Jewish or black or whatever, they always got paid. He was very honest like that. So yeah, Carl Perkins said, I wish he did all my music. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
Well done, Carl. Great history, and we've got. I'll tell you right now, we've got, as I said at the top of the segment, fact checker that they don't want you to know about. That's me. Well, I got fact checkers for my fact checking, and they fact check Carl correct that he's got it right. Jewish guys wrote Hound Dog. So there you go. Take that, Media Matters. Go fact check Joy-Ann Reid now with her Trump hair. All right, we'll take a break. I'm Alex Marlow. This is the Larry Elder Show. Happy to be in for the Sage, and we'll be right back. This one went even faster than yesterday. This was a blast today. Thank you, team. Thanks to Sean. Thanks to Zach. Thanks to Richard. Thanks to Matthew. All these guys who are helping out, making the show flow smooth, the great B-roll on the TV, Salem News Channel. And, of course, thank you to the Sage himself, who has given me a lifetime of wisdom. And now I get to sit in his shoes for a day or two, which is really nice. Thanks to all of you in the audience as well. If you want to get in touch with me, aloha@alexmarlow.com, the Alex Marlow podcast feed in the Salem Network and Salem News Channel over the weekends. Of course, the book Breaking the Law, and the website Breitbart.com all day, every day for cutting edge news. And hopefully I'll see you soon. It might not be too long. It might only be a couple days. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see what the reviews, as the reviews come in. We'll see if the ratings are huge. All right, Jeff, Yucaipa, California. Welcome to the show, Jeff. You're on the Larry Elder Show with Alex.
Hi, Alex. James Naismith in 1891 created a little game in Springfield College with some baskets. And if we, in the same spirit as Joy Behar, didn't allow cultural appropriation for that game, we would never know the likes of Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson. I've got just one white guy on my top 10 list.
Yeah, it's so interesting and that you confuse Joy Behar and Joy Reid, by the way, because they're the same, but one's black and one's white. And we're so colorblind now that Joy Behar and Joy Reid are just the same to us because that's how we live now. Jeff, it's such a great point. And it's one of these things where, I grew up and my favorite talk show host was Larry Elder, and I was a sports fanatic, and my heroes were Tiger Woods, Kobe Bryant, and Barry Bonds, three deeply flawed human beings, and all I could do was watch these guys ball. That's all I wanted to do all night, all weekend, and they keep insisting we're racist. We're not. You guys got through to us. We figured it out, and it's just, how are you so obsessed at this point in time?
Yes, I agree.
Jeff, thank you. Thank you. Look, it's if diversity is truly our strength, if we really mean to work together as a society and get the best out of people, then this is just a toxic message that's out there. And if you're a young person, you're coming of age in American politics, I'm just hoping you're turned off by that message coming from the Joy Reids of the world. And you embrace the more inclusive message that you're going to hear from people like me and people like Larry, because it's not rooted in race. And Larry taught me this better than anyone else, which is that if you start judging people by the content of their skin, then it also cheapens their accomplishments. It makes it so that if they do accomplish things, and then all you do is see maybe they're a DEI hire, maybe they're a diversity hire. This is one of the toxic things that's been placed in our culture. It's also when you teach systematic racism, then you're telling people that they cannot achieve because the system is holding them down. And this creates this cycle of perpetual racism, perpetual hatred towards your fellow man for things that are just way out of their control. Life is not fair. It's never been fair. We all have things that are advantages to us. Look at Sean with his big beard. I can't grow a beard like Sean's beard. And yet I've done okay in my life. So not everything is fair. Not everything is fair, but that's okay. And once you start embracing that, we should teach resilience as a people. That's what I'm for. We're for resilience, the Larry Elder Show. I'm Alex Marlow. Thanks to all of you once again, and I'll talk to you soon.